Hi, my name is Kyle Burkholder, and I'm the pastor here at Covenant Church. Thank you for being here and for being part of Covenant Conversations. Our desire is that the conversations we have in this space extend into your relationships and ultimately, maybe even impact your everyday life. For our friends in Northwest Ohio, we believe that life happens in community, and we'd love to invite you to join us and join the conversation in person. So just head to bgcovenant.org/visit to learn more. Now, let's get in the conversation.
Welcome to episode 3 of our parenting series. What we are going to be talking about today is family rhythms in a chaotic world, in a world where our schedules, the calendar on your phone might be the most hectic place on earth. And Nick Gillispie is here to help us make sense of that. I'm Kyle Burkholder. We are so glad that you've joined us and that you are with us on this parenting journey. We have been talking about all the things, and today we get into that big thing, the schedule, the rhythm, the chaos. Nick, good luck. Help us by starting to make some sense of what we do in the modern world.
I think of this passage in the scriptures, and it's found in Matthew chapter 9, where Jesus is standing over Jerusalem. He's particularly overlooking the markets, and he's with his disciples, and he's observing the marketplace and the hustle and bustle, people coming and going and buying and selling. And it says that he had compassion on them as sheep without a shepherd. And I feel like that when I think of the modern parent and our schedules. We are harassed. We feel somewhat helpless at the whims of society and its demands. And we are like sheep without a shepherd on how to use our time in such a way as to produce life. And I think when Jesus' compassion was not because people weren't being active, they weren't lazy sloths, right? They were doing business, coming and going, but it was this busyness without life. It was this work without real aim or real purpose. And as parents, we can feel like that. How is it that we steward and use our time to really drive towards real God-given purpose so that I can experience the abundant life that God has for us?
So you're saying Jesus is looking over my shoulder as I pull up my calendar app on my phone, and a single tear drops down as he looks at me and he says, "There's a lot of activity and no life." That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, keep going then. This is going on a good start.
Tears not a gavel, so okay. There should be some freedom there. But okay. Yeah. I think we have to discipline ourselves in our time and how we use it, rather than be disciplined by our time and the demands of the world. I think of Paul speaking in Corinthians. He says that he disciplines his body. He beats his body. He makes it his slave, meaning my body will be of godly good. And the same with our schedules, that our schedules would be of godly goodness.
So it's almost like he has an end in mind. So when we look at our schedules, sometimes when you're saying our schedule runs us, we're just trying to catch up to get to the next thing. It's in charge, and it tells us where we're going instead of us setting it to help us get where we need to be going.
Exactly.
So in that sense, that sounds to me like a little bit of a family on a mission, or a family with a purpose. So whether you have a mission statement on the wall above the kitchen table, or you just know where you're going as a family, that all of a sudden starts to sound to me like where this is headed. As in, anybody who's ever taken a road trip knows you have to know kind of where you're going. And the road trip can be a ton of fun along the way, with stops and sightseeing and meandering and adventures. But if you don't know where you're going, you kind of end up going nowhere, as opposed to going the direction you want to go. And so what you're suggesting is maybe there are some ways for us to find a target or a direction, even with our time, our calendars, our schedule. And then if we have our purpose set and our mission in mind as we do it, I think you used the word tame. We could almost tame our schedules and get them to work for us as we go about living kind of the God life as modern parents.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we're not going to be talking about time management. We're talking about something, I think, quite different than just pure time management.
Right. It's almost the domino before that. If we get this other thing right, then the other things take care of themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have to admit that we do have places where we lack control. Yeah. Again, demands of the world, the pace of our world. Obviously, as our children grow old, they have their own agendas and their own agency. And so there's a lot where we can feel like we lack control. But we have control over a couple of things. And of these things, we need to take responsibility and take ownership of. This is what God would want us to do as shepherd leaders in our home. Right. The first is that we do have control in certain developmental stages. We went over this the last episode. But we have control over places, spaces, and people that our children are around.
Right. Places,
Spaces, and people. Now, again, when I'm in the caretaking phase compared to the consultant phase, my influence over places, spaces, and people, varies, and what that looks like is going to change. But I at least can assess and kind of, work with my child or bore into our time what is going to influence my child. And so, it is up to me if I want my child to know God, to put them in places where they can discover God. And again, at 3, it's going to look different than at 13 or 18. But showing up at church or showing up at group and having our kids be influenced by the church is an important thing. I have control over that. Right. Spaces, what's the environment? Again, we can take our kids to a concert, and I can take them to one kind of a concert, and that space is going to communicate something to them. And I can take them to a different type of concert, and that space, that environment is going to communicate something different to them on where real life is found and what our purpose is. And then in regards to people, my kids do, as they get older, choose more and more of their own influences, but I also have a choice over that as well, whether it's choosing what school my kid goes to, what other families that we spend time with, that I do have some control over the types of people that we spend time. In this, based on developmental stage, I can be mindful of what am I developing in my child as I put them in places, spaces, and around different people.
That's really interesting. And I would suggest it might be really good for us to rewind, go back 4 minutes or so to the beginning of that small section and even apply that digitally. So as you're talking about going to a concert, it's what social media or what website or what chat group or what video game that they're online with, and who are the people that they're with or the places there are, even in the digital world. Because increasingly we have kids that while their places may not be out of the home, they're all over the world digitally. And that's something we can control. And we feel out of control because we don't always get it. But that would be, maybe I would suggest people go back and listen to that little thing just one more time, but apply it to the digital world as well. Okay, so take us from there.
That's
so
a great add-on, yeah.
Where do we go from there?
Well, the other thing we have control of is that we have control over some of our time.
Okay.
I call it the time paradox, but that's a heavy word right there.
88.8 gigawatts.
The time paradox. So the reality is in my schedule, some of my time is required. My work demands my time. If I want to get paid, I've got to show up. And sometimes I don't have control over when I've got to show up, where I've got to be. My family might have certain demands over my time. And because I'm in a family, my time is required. I can't just do what I want to do. Grandma and grandpa are saying, we're going to go do this thing, and we're going to go do that thing. Some of my time is demanded. Now, some demands are legitimate and some are illegitimate. But for example, if your kid is part of an organization or something like that, or a team, that team might say, if you're part of this team, you need to show up at this place. And now we have to decide, well, that's a demand. Am I going to meet that demand or am I not going to meet that demand? But some of our time is demanded. Some of it's absorbed. I call this chaos. Meaning we have one plan for our day, and all of a sudden the hot water heater goes out, and all of a sudden a lot of our time is now put towards some endeavor, towards something that we didn't plan or choose, but life just absorbs our time. But this last bit of time we do have control over, and that is that bit of time I either choose to squander it or invest it. So of my time, what is required of me, demanded of me, and what's absorbed through chaos, what's left, that time, I can either invest it or I can squander it. And as parents, this is where, as we sit down and look at our schedules, look at our time, we can be intentional to invest that time moving towards our family mission and purpose, rather than just using it for whatever feels right or whatever meets the need of the day. So how do we invest our time? I would say that there's two things that we need to consider. The first is substance. And again, we're not trying to tell you to do X or Y with your day. Is it better to go to church or is it better to go to the football game? We're not trying to make that decision for you. Just being mindful of, on a Friday night, you could do one or the other. And you can be mindful of like what that time means to you and your family based on that family mission and purpose. But substance is, in a time, what are we doing and what is it developing? So during my time, we can do something that's recreational. We can do something that's learning. We can do something that's sustenance, like eating or something like that, or it's family. We can create space to talk and relate with one another. So in that time, I'm doing something that's meaningful. And then secondly, that time is actually developing something.
So you're saying with a little bit of intentionality, any substance, no matter what I'm doing, there can be something redeeming in that I can be moving towards the goal, even if I'm eating or at the football game or at church. All of those have the potential to be like effective developmental time.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think if we understand what we're trying to do and what we're trying to develop, it keeps us from maybe trying to force things into that time that don't like really belong. So going to the football game doesn't have to necessarily be an overly spiritualized experience, right? It is what it is,
There
right?
is a Hail Mary.
So, the players prayed at the end of the game
There it
and
is.
before the game, So the second thing is there's substance and there's scene, this is the environment. That my environment creates the appropriate space to achieve desired results. So I'll say it again. The environment that we are in creates the appropriate space to achieve desired results. So
Illustrate this for me. Make this make sense.
there's a lot. Okay, yeah. So we're eating dinner. We can eat dinner, in front of the TV, or we can eat it at the table. And again, we're not saying one is right or wrong. They're two different experiences, two different scenes. And a family meal, doing family movie night, like that's fine. But it probably isn't going to be high quality connection time. And family dinner around the table is going to be a different type of interaction with one another. Now, if I want to try to make it sort of intentional in regards to even talking about, let's say, doing a little family devotional, in front of the TV is going to be less effective as opposed to at the table.
Yeah.
Another one might be discipline. So this isn't necessarily in a physical space. This is more an emotional space. I can discipline in the heat of the moment, or I can discipline an hour later. And so
That's good.
what is my temperament? What's my kid's temperament? Am I going to discipline right now? Or is it more wise to wait an hour? Or is there something so urgent right now that waiting an hour will miss a moment because this is the right scene? So you can imagine if I pull my kid out of the street because they're about ready to get hit by a car because they ran chasing after a ball, waiting an hour wouldn't make sense. Right then and there is really appropriate.
Yeah.
So, but you're doing something a little more convoluted. Maybe there's your kid is interacting with their friend and there's something inappropriate about there and you're really kind of worked up about it. Well, maybe finding level heads, in an appropriate time to be able to engage a more complex issue would make sense.
So this feels really clarifying and at the same time still sort of chaotic in the idea that you're giving me some really clear ways to make some sense, but I'm still living in the chaos. So would it be accurate to say that this is a little bit, the modern life, modern rhythms and family rhythms is a little like jazz music, where if you've ever gone and heard jazz music, it's a little chaotic at first. You can't quite figure out where they're going or what they're doing. But once you clue into it, instead of classical music where everybody's playing the same thing on the same sheet the same way every time, it's sort of they find the beat and they're in the same key, and then they start to play off of each other, and it begins. It's jazz. Jazz has its own kind of rhythm to it, but it's an organic, natural rhythm that once you find it is incredible. And it sounds to me like you're saying we can't get the chaos out of life, but we can learn in this overly convoluted metaphor now, we can learn how to make jazz music out of the chaos. We can get those pieces together in a rhythm that begins to make it beautiful again. Is that maybe an accurate way of summarizing what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think, rather than chaos kind of overwhelming and taking over and then giving ourselves the chaos, I think, again, we can't overly manage all of that. We only have so much control. But how am I how am I finding that key so that I can keep my family moving towards that family purpose?
Got it.
So this would be being proactive rather than reactive. So sometimes, like with our schedules, things all of a sudden feel so overwhelming. We kind of go into fight or flight, right? I'm going to battle against my schedule. I'm going to battle against the demands of my schedule, or I'm just going to run away. I'm just going to like check out. But I can be proactive, meaning I can sit down on a weekly or even monthly basis and say, what sort of things are being built into my time? Don't think I'm saying that you need to like schedule every single hour. I mean, I know some of us are more scheduled than others, but what I do think is in a given week or a given month, we can look at it and say, what's the flow? What's the feel? Are we creating the right developmental opportunities for our family? And what I would do is I would build a rhythm that aims towards your family mission. So hypothetically, if your family mission is that we want to all live as God's kids, okay? Mom, dad, all the children, we want to live as God's kids as your family mission statement. Well, then that might say something of how much time you spend at sports games compared to like other things, or how where you go on vacation or something. But then also, I think you want to evaluate maybe even on a quarterly basis. As we said, our kids get older. Those developmental transitions come quick, that if we evaluate quarterly, are we still kind of making the right sort of decisions that we want? We can be proactive like with our schedules.
So we get a report card from our kids with quarterly grades. And that lets us know if our kids are on track to get the thing done for the year, to get the A or the B plus, the C minus. We know where our kids are headed because we're evaluating, and the teachers give us that evaluation. So you're suggesting even as a family, we could sit down with our family, and as your kids get older, they can be part of the conversation of going, are we on track to accomplish what we want in this season towards our mission?
Yeah, that's great. And I think especially as our kids develop, maybe even giving them more and more of a voice into that. So, but I think too, and this is more to like give freedom. For example, let's say your family is like really committed to doing a family devotional every day or once a week. I don't know. When they're 4, that can look a certain way. And when they're 14, it's going to look different, and that's okay. But I think, if we take stock of our time and we find that right space and we find that the substance that we want to kind of fill that time with, then we're able to develop our family in the way that we want to.
Well, it sounds like we've made some sense of the chaos of family rhythm and modern rhythm. And so what we're going to do next time is Nick is going to walk us through communication as a family, the modern family communication. How do we do it? Why do we do it the way we do it? And how can we do it well in the season to come? And so that is episode 4 that is coming next. So on behalf of Nick, thank you for joining us for this part of our family series. And we'll be excited to come back and do it all again. So we hope you join us for that.